Welcome to Legal Lines. My name is Tom O'Shea, the host of this program, brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation. Before we begin this program, I would like to announce that this is my last program as host. I've been hosting this program for 10 years. I thank everyone for the opportunity, the people at the Bar Foundation for trusting me to host the program. But now it's time for me to pass the baton to my good friend, Glenn Smith, who will be the new host of Legal Lines.
Thank you, Tom. It's a big chair, so we're hopefully gonna be as successful as you have been in this.
I'm sure you'll be doing a great job. And for his first guest, I get to announce his first guest because I'm the first guest. And the topic tonight is Mid Penn Legal Services. Go ahead, Glenn, interview me.
All right, Tom, thanks. So, Mid Penn Legal Services, you are the president of the board for Mid Penn, is that right?
That is correct. Mid Penn Legal Services is an organization that provides legal representation to indigent people in civil matters. And I really want to stress civil matters. There's a constitutional right to an attorney in criminal cases. So if someone is indigent, they don't have the proper resources, they can use the public defender's office, and the tax dollars pay for public defenders to represent people in criminal cases because it's a constitutional right to have counsel. There is no constitutional right to have counsel in civil cases, but there's a tremendous need by people with limited means and below poverty line for legal representation. And Mid Penn Legal Services provides that representation in a number of cases. The volume is so great that it cannot be for every case that comes through, but we do try to provide in cases where there's an immediate need for legal representation.
So you mentioned a few things here that I want to touch on, get a little bit better explanation, but before you do that, Mid Penn, they service the residents here of York County, right?
That is correct. Actually, Mid Penn is an organization that covers 18 counties in mainly south central Pennsylvania. It would be anywhere from Altoona to the west to Reading in the east, from the Mason-Dixon line south of York County up to State College, Clearfield. So anything in that area, those 18 counties, is covered by Mid Penn Legal Services. There are different legal services organizations throughout the state. Mid Penn is actually the second largest organization. Philadelphia is the largest, but Mid Penn is the second largest legal aid program in the state.
Now, one of the words that you used earlier was indigent. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, indigent basically means somebody who has very limited income, very few assets. And in order to determine who is eligible for Mid Penn Legal Services, there needs to be a cutoff as to who can be accepted. For most cases, and there are exceptions to this, someone is determined indigent if the family would be 125% or less than the poverty line, okay? What the poverty line is depends upon the number of people in the household. So there could be households with with a large number of children, for example, where $40,000 to $50,000 could actually let somebody qualify for Mid Penn, but it varies. And there are certain cases, for example, domestic violence cases, where the threshold is, or the dollar amount is actually higher. If you have a higher income than that, Mid Penn would be able to help. So if you're having trouble with, with a limited income, getting legal representation, it doesn't hurt to contact Mid Penn to see if you qualify. There is a screening process that people have to go through in order to see if they qualify. But if they qualify, then depending on the type of case that they have, they would be assigned to an attorney to represent them.
Is there anything that they would need to provide in order to qualify? Do they have to come up with a pay stub or
yes,
some documentation?
They'll have to fill out a form and provide some verification of what their income is, yes.
Yeah. So what type of things qualify as income? Obviously wages would.
Well, mainly it's wages. It's rare that they get many other sources of income, but any type of of government benefit, a pension, Social Security, that would be part of someone's income. It's rare that there would be people who have, for example, rental income or other assets that would produce income and still qualify for legal services.
Okay. So when is it that they're taking a look at just what the overall income is, or do they take into credit what type of expenses somebody has as well?
The expenses are not a big factor, okay? The assets that they own may be a factor, okay? Quite frankly, there are people who meet with the clients and do this, and I am not an expert on the rules, okay? Mid Penn is governed by a board of volunteers, and I've been on the board for about 6 or 7 years now. We meet in Harrisburg, which is where the center of the Mid Penn administrative office is in Harrisburg. And so the board itself meets quarterly. We go over policies. We basically guide the direction of the organization, but there is an executive director who does an excellent job. Her name is Rodia Thomas. She's been there for a number of years. She knows Mid Penn inside and out, all the budget numbers, et cetera, and how it works. And it takes a lot to do this because there are attorneys in each of the county offices who work for Mid Penn. That's their full-time jobs. Okay, they are legal aid attorneys, and they've devoted their careers to helping indigent people, and Mid Penn pays them a salary as an attorney to do this. There's also all the support staff that a law firm would have. There are paralegals, there are secretaries, there are administrative people who all help with that. The budget for Mid Penn is roughly around $8 million a year for the 18 counties. So it's a large budget. It has to be well managed, and everything is audited by the government, and to make sure that the money is well used. There are various sources of the income that support that $8 million budget. Some of it is tax dollars. And other sources include donations. We always look for donations. Most of the donations do come from attorneys, I will say that, but anybody can go on the Mid Penn website and make a donation to Mid Penn. A lot of the bar foundations or associations within the 18-county area will give a check every year as a donation, which is very, very helpful, and that allows us to have more attorneys to do the work for the poverty population.
Great. So let's go back for the qualifications. If somebody were to have some questions about whether I qualify for legal representation through Mid Penn, is there a website they can get more information from?
Yes, Mid Penn has a website. I can't say the exact number,
okay.
but you can
look Google
that
it.
Also, if you basically contact the local office. Throughout the 18 counties, there's a local office in almost every county. Some of the smaller counties do not have an office, and you have to go to the neighboring county.
But York obviously
does.
York
obviously has. York has, I believe, 4 full-time attorneys representing people in York County. And you can contact that local office, and they will direct you to how you go through the process of applying based upon your need. I also want to point out that there's a triage system as to what cases they will take. There is such a great need for legal representation in the for people of limited means that we cannot handle everything. It's just impossible.
Certainly.
It's
so
just
with
impossible.
a staff like that, any idea how many cases are presented to Mid Penn?
I have the statistics somewhere. I'd be lying I can't remember them off the top of my head. I have them written down somewhere. I can look them up. But in rough numbers, roughly 25% of the cases deal with child custody. That is like one of the biggest areas of concern where there is a need, and that's viewed as something that's important. The welfare of a child's at stake. So that is something that Mid Penn will always get involved with if there is a custody situation.
Okay.
There are some other things that if we have time I'll talk about, but so in other words, if somebody goes to Mid Penn and says, well, I have a child who lives with me, but I want a custody order, okay, well, is there any problem? No, the other parent sees the child on the weekends, but I just wanted him on paper. Mid Penn won't view that as an emergency. Now, if there was an abduction or if somebody filed a custody case against the other parent, then they would view it as an emergency and take the case. But because of the limited resources, we can't just give everybody, representation. So we try to basically triage it to see what needs the help the fastest. And to be fair, it's also to be fair. And instead of taking the first case that comes in the door and saying, oh, we ran out of time or we ran out of attorneys, we're able to say, okay, we can't take this type of case, but we will take this type of case, and make it consistent so that the clients are properly represented in what we view as the high needs. Like I said, custody is one of the highest needs. The second one would be domestic violence, okay? And there Mid Penn will represent the victims of domestic violence, and roughly 20% of the caseload for Mid Penn attorneys.
Is that predominantly protection from abuse?
It's predominantly protection from abuse. Also other forms of abuse, elderly abuse. Would be another category. But yes, that would be something that is it. I also want to point out when I'm saying this that each county has some different little nuances within Mid Penn. And that's because county bar associations who donate to Mid Penn can designate what they want their money used for. So for example, in one county, they'll say Mid Penn attorneys have to handle all the protection from abuse cases for petitioners, regardless of means, because that's how we want our money spent. Okay, so there are some variations county to county, not because the board of Mid Penn decided that we like this county better or we like that county better, but because the funding that comes in is something that a county would designate. This is what we want in our county. Now, for example, in York County, there is the Bar Foundation donates enough money every year to hire a full-time attorney who works for Mid Penn. They pay the equivalent of that attorney's salary plus all benefits, and just like any other employer, health insurance and money contributed to a retirement plan. All of that is part of what the package would be for an employee, and the Bar Foundation of York County says, well, we will cover the cost of having an extra attorney here, because Mid Penn can only afford 3 attorneys here, so we have a 4th attorney, and that 4th attorney is designated to handle only family law matters. Okay, so that's because that's where the greatest need is. But there are other areas that have need, and by the way, the attorneys who handle these cases are really very good at what they're doing, because they concentrate in that area. So the family law attorney for Mid Penn concentrates in custody cases and in protection from abuse cases.
That's a really good point, Tom. I know you hear often, I want a private attorney because, if it's a government attorney or an attorney that's provided by Mid Penn, they're not as good because they can't get a real job. But anything is further from the truth, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, we're just about ready to take our first break here today, and we'll be back in just a few moments, more with Tom O'Shea about Mid Penn Legal Services. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Glenn Smith, your new host, and I'm here with my old host, Tom O'Shea, who is here on behalf of Mid Penn Legal Services, the president of the board of directors. Welcome back, Tom.
Well, thank you, and I enjoy being the interviewee.
Glad. I'm still going to be calling you for tips, just so you know.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
so you're not going anywhere. All right. So we've been talking about Mid Penn here today, and one of the things we talked about before the half was about the services that Mid Penn Legal Services provides. But before we do that, we have an anniversary on our hands. Is that right?
Yes, this year Mid Penn is celebrating its 50th anniversary. There'll be a celebration gathering up in Hershey in October, but it's the 50th anniversary of Mid Penn. Now, let me just give a little caveat to that. Mid Penn itself as an organization did not start 50 years ago. The concept of organizations providing attorneys for low-income civil cases began 50 years ago, with each county having its own organization. So it was, at one time it was called like York County Legal Services, and then several years later it became part of Central Pennsylvania Legal Services, which included several of the counties that are now part of Mid Penn. And then it grew again, and several of the other smaller organizations joined to become part of Mid Penn Legal Services. So, but the idea of attorneys working for an organization that is dedicated to representing low-income people began 50 years ago. So that's what the celebration is.
Now, these people, we talked a little bit about them before the break, these attorneys that Mid Penn has and the other legal services around the state as well. These are people that are really dedicated to helping people.
They are. I mean, there are Mid Penn attorneys who have dedicated their careers basically to helping indigent people through civil cases. And because they deal with areas of the law that maybe someone in private practice wouldn't deal with as often, they become experts in those fields. For example, housing, a big issue with Mid Penn, landlord-tenant issues, evictions, that type of thing, mortgage foreclosures. These are things that people experience and don't have the money to hire a private attorney. The Mid Penn attorneys deal with these issues all the time. And as a result, they know that law better than most attorneys would know that law, and they're familiar with the system.
Right.
Public benefits, whether it be some form of welfare benefit, some type of subsidized housing. They know whether or not someone should qualify, who should qualify, and what hoops to go through with that. So the attorneys who with Mid Penn they do an excellent job, and they know the areas of law that they're dedicated to represent people.
And I can certainly, from my experience as well, dealing with attorneys from Mid Penn, they really understand their craft. They're knowledgeable, they're experienced, and they know a lot of those nuanced areas that you and I don't necessarily know just because we don't deal with it on a frequent basis.
We don't see those. I mean, a private attorney isn't going to have many clients who come in and say, I'm having problems with my landlord because.
Right. It deals with Section 8 housing, let's
right.
say.
Yeah.
Sure, so, which
exactly.
is a very nuanced area.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. So what other types of areas does Mid Penn Legal Services help? We talked a little bit about custody before the break, and we just spoke about landlord-tenant.
That's the other, public benefits is another area where Mid Penn attorneys are doing, a lot of work.
And to explain further our viewers, when we're talking about types of benefits, what are we talking about?
Oh, there could be any type of welfare benefit, food stamp eligibility, unemployment compensation issues, those types of benefits that somebody might be entitled to and having trouble getting through the system.
Great. Any other areas?
Those are the areas mainly that they concentrate in. Let me just see, I have a little cheat sheet here. Consumer obligations, that would include bankruptcy, that would include creditors who are coming after somebody for bills where they paid unfair interest rates, that type of thing.
Okay, so if I haven't paid my credit card bill in some time, is that a service that I could get help with?
Well, they're not going to help you pay your credit card, obviously.
I would think not.
But they could analyze your situation and say whether or not you would be a candidate for bankruptcy or some other debt reduction program that might exist.
Sure. Now, you earlier said is they handle things of a civil nature, and
Right.
civil is a pretty big, broad word.
Mm-hmm.
In the civil arena, are there areas of the law that Mid Penn will not handle?
Not because they will not handle on principle. It's just that they will not handle certain areas where, because of the number of cases. For example, I said we have a full-time family law attorney. They do not handle divorces, which for anybody handling family law, that's a big part of the private practice of family law, is divorce law. But because we have to limit what can be done with legal services dollars, we cannot have the attorneys representing people through divorce litigation. Okay? Now, there are some ways that we deal with people who want a divorce, who don't have the means to hire an attorney. And it's done in a couple of different ways, but each bar association has attorneys, in addition to the Mid Penn attorneys, who volunteer their time to do what we call pro bono work. So a number of attorneys who will do pro bono work will take cases that Mid Penn cannot handle, not simply because of the volume. And they will come in and handle that. And in York County, for example, with divorces, we have a divorce clinic where we will have people come in, and a number of attorneys will be there. It's a few times a year, and we will have all the paperwork to go through to get a no-fault divorce in place, where it's just a matter of going through the process. And we'll literally have the clients meet with an attorney who will give them all the paperwork and explain the process so that they can literally do it themselves. And so that's a clinic for that. Now, if the people have assets they want to divide, then most likely they wouldn't qualify for Mid Penn anyway, because if the assets are substantial, we look at that as a possible fee-generating case, because eventually there would be assets to divide and possibly pay the legal fees out of. Okay, so, but there are some attorneys who will do pro bono work, handling even, small amounts of assets to be divided, and they'll do that as pro bono volunteers.
How about expungements?
Well, that's a very good area. As a matter of fact, that is something that the bar associations throughout the area have attorneys volunteering to handle, and Mid Penn has, to some extent, helped assist those. That we're not taking in, Mid Penn isn't taking in expungement cases for clients directly, but indirectly we're holding workshops, and we're having people come in and using the volunteer pro bono attorneys to do that. Because an expungement for somebody who had a criminal record many years ago that could be expunged could lead that person to better employment, no longer be in poverty, and it benefits society completely. So we have a number of attorneys who volunteer to help in that realm.
Certainly, and that was particularly prevalent recently with the Clean Slate Initiative that was passed up
Right.
in Harrisburg, right?
Right.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about pro bono, and York County, when it comes to pro bono work, is highly regarded in the state. Is that right?
York County, it's recognized almost every year by the State Bar Association for being one of the top counties with respect to pro bono work, with respect to support of legal services in general, and with support to through its foundation. At the beginning of every show that I hosted for 10 years, I always say that this program, the program we're doing now, is hosted by the York County Bar Foundation. The Bar Foundation is the charitable arm of the Bar Association. So we get donations. Most of our donations come from lawyers. We get them from some other sources as well. And most of our donations come from bar organized events. The Bar Association itself donates money each year to the foundation. And then we take that money and we support charities that are legally related charities. Mid Penn is the largest charity that the foundation donates to. But the foundation also does public service projects. This program is a public service project, which is why I said at the beginning of every program, this program is brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation. It's part of its public service.
And we'll be saying that at least one more time before the show's over, right?
That's the plug for the York County Bar Foundation. I'm president of Mid Penn now. A few years ago, I was president of the York County Bar Foundation.
You've managed to wear quite a few hats over the years, Tom.
I've worn hats over the years. But as I get older now, I'm saying, let some young guy like Glenn take over this program.
Well, I appreciate the word young being used there, and thank God this is recorded so I can hold on to that. So
Okay.
Thank you for that. So when we're talking about the number of cases that Mid Penn has, and we're talking 5 staff attorneys, was it?
In York.
In York, right, in York. About how many clients, and you may not know the number for the county, but how many clients does Mid Penn actually assist in the course of a year?
In the average year, it's over 20,000 clients. Who they're like 21,000 is the last year's number. It was just a little under 21,000 people in the Mid Penn area that had direct representation by Mid Penn attorneys.
Yeah, that's a significant number.
It's a large number. And by the way, the allocation of number of attorneys by Mid Penn per office has to do with the poverty population, okay, of the county. So those are the figures that are used in order to determine how to devote our resources. Okay, so a lot of work goes into deciding, well, why don't we put all the attorneys in Harrisburg and instead of not in York or whatever. It's allocated based upon the need, based upon the poverty population.
Now, I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit more about pro bono and one of the other programs that they have, which is the Modest Means program. Both of those programs are administered through the Bar Association, not the foundation, right?
That is correct. But the pro bono is something that York County attorneys step up and do. We look at it as an obligation. Not every attorney does it. It's not a requirement. In some states, it's a requirement for attorneys to do so much pro bono work. It's not in Pennsylvania. But statistically, York County is one of the highest in the state with the number of attorneys who participate in pro bono. And you can participate in one of 2 ways. You can either represent people, take cases, and a number of attorneys do that. I mean, I take so many a year where we represent the client who isn't paying us a fee, but we represent them as though they were, and we handle their case for free. Okay, if they have to qualify, but then we represent them without charging a fee.
So if somebody wanted to get more information about a pro bono attorney or even the Modest Means program, how do they go about doing that?
They can contact Mid Penn, or they can contact the York County Bar Association.
That's fantastic. Well, we're running out of time here, Tom, unfortunately. But before we reach the end of your final show, and we'd love to have you back again some other time, maybe talking about divorce or how your vacation from this is going on. Okay. I'd like to thank you again for the time that you've had in this chair, and it's going to be fun going forward. So again, this is Legal Lines. I'm Glenn Smith, and thank you for thank you for being with us, and we'll see you again real soon.